So if inflectional processes were what you have to do to the sounds of morphemes in order to show that you've added a new morpheme, a new piece of meaning to the word, are you adding extra sounds to the end or to the middle? Are you swapping out one sound for another? Are you reduplicating the whole thing? Inflectional categories then would be the aspects of the world that you're speaking of, the world that you're trying to speak into existence, that have to be agreed with. So again, our example of cat and cats. Cat would be just the idea that I'm trying to convey, but if there's more than one cat, I have to change the form of this word so that it agrees with the truth, so that it agrees with some fact about the world I'm speaking of. And the fact about the world that I'm speaking of that must be agreed with is that there's more than one cat. So I have to use the plural ending s here, cats. So again, these processes that we saw, affixation, where I could do prefixes or interfixes or a suffix, alternation, where I would swap out y for z in a word, or suppletion, where I would just replace the entire stem with a totally new stem, or reduplication, where I would double the whole or part of a morpheme and add that as a morpheme. These can be used to mark a lot of different categories. One of the ones that we just saw with cats is this idea of number. You could have singular number, you could have plural number, you could have dual number, and nouns, verbs, and adjectives, sometimes even adverbs, will all have this tendency to agree for number. Person is a category that we use to talk about the perspective of who is doing the action or who is being talked about. First person would include the speaker, second person would exclude the speaker but include the listeners, and third person would be someone different, neither the speaker nor the listener. And there are languages that would actually have a fourth person as well for divine beings or for other kinds of entities. Case, which nouns and adjectives inflect for, would be what is the role that a noun is playing in a sentence. Gender or class would be sort of arbitrary groupings about there's one group of nouns, there's another group of nouns, and the noun endings themselves might have to inflect for gender or class. We'll usually see that if a noun inflects for something, an adjective will also inflect for that same category. Tense is a unique aspect of verbs, where something falls on a timeline. Aspect, the kind of event that it is. Degree, the size or greatness of something. And honor, which is a social category about the social relationship between people. These are all examples of morphological categories, things about the world that could be revealed by using these phonological processes, adding sounds, changing sounds, swapping out sounds altogether, or copying and pasting sounds. So in this slide I want to talk about number and person, two of these categories. And these two often do work together. Person, as I said, refers to who is being referred to or who is being attributed a certain action or attribute. So if this woman is the person speaking, this would be a first person use because I, the first person singular pronoun, it includes the speaker and there's only one person involved. If we want to say that she is speaking to just this man, this is a listener, not a speaker. So he would be the second person. You can see that her eyes are directed toward him. That sort of signals that he's included or meant to be interpreted as the second person pronoun you. Her, if this speaker is talking to this listener about this other woman, this could be a third person. And pronouns like she or her could be attributed to her as third person pronouns. If they were talking about the computer, this third person pronoun it might be attributed to them. So like it could be the pronoun used to refer to this computer, which is non-living. Them too, this is sort of colloquial, but if you were going to say something about two people, which is not actually in the picture, not one of the ones sitting on this table, it maybe have this group of crazy cats over here. There's like them two cats. Or I could refer to this group of cats as they. They are playing with yarn if she was speaking to him. So these would all be third person. So someone other than who's along this axis of speaker to listener or audience. We, you could say we two are going to do this. So this woman could be speaking on behalf of her and this other woman to this man. So that would be a first person plural. If she's speaking but including someone else along with her within that first person pronoun we. It could be that actually she is going to group this third person together with this man. And that she's actually, even though her eye contact is looking at him, she could be speaking to address both of these together. And then we would need a second person plural pronoun. There's no standard second person plural pronoun in English, but regional variants include something like y'all or you guys. If this woman is speaking and she wants to exclude these two people at the table with her, she can also say we, but instead of saying we two are going to do this, do you want to come? She could be including her and some other absent person. Maybe her and her partner, her and someone else. We, but not y'all, not you guys, not you two, are included in this we. So we can actually be a very confusing pronoun because the listener doesn't know, are they meant to be included and interpret themselves into this we, or are they meant to be excluded and it's we, the speaker, plus someone else who is absent. Now we'll see verbs conjugate for these combinations of number and person, of first person singular, second person singular, third person plural. So a typical example of this would be the Spanish verb hablar, which would be hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, hablais, hablan. So these would be singular, these would be plural, this would be first person, second person, third person. So this kind of traditional European six-person conjugation form, you would have number on the y-axis, number on the x-axis and person on the y-axis. Which process is this that we're adding these phonemes to the end of the root abl? This would be affixation, and particularly these would be suffixes. So Spanish adds suffixes which simultaneously indicate both the number and the person together. Case is a nominal category on nouns and adjectives. It never would happen with a verb. It can only be done with a noun. And case indicates what role in a sentence a given noun is performing or playing. So let me give you an example. When I was teaching in Lithuania, I had a student write this sentence in an essay: America discovered Columbus. Now, this kind of makes it sound like Columbus was on a singing show and America discovered his secret talents. But what the speaker actually, or what the writer actually wanted to say was that Columbus had discovered America. So why would they put this in the wrong order? We're used to, as English speakers, the subject, the person doing something, always being in this first noun spot, and the thing being done to is always in the second noun spot. So the way that it's written now, I would always interpret America as the doer and Columbus the thing being done to. But in Lithuania, this is not true. This is what this sentence would be in Lithuanian: Columbus atrado America. And this would mean Columbus discovered America, the way that the normal, what you would think it would be. The us indicates that this is Columbus is the doer. This ending means this is the person who does something. This long at the end says America. This indicates that America is the thing being done to, the thing being discovered. I could actually make a different sentence. If I wanted to say America honors Columbus, which would make sense in English to say something in that order, the fact that there's a short here and not the long one says, okay, America is the doer. The fact that I don't have the S on Columbus, I took the S off and just have this oo. This indicates that Columbus is the thing being done to. So these endings give a clue. America is the doer, now Columbus is the being done to. And this is the typical order. Well, because Lithuanian has these endings which do the work for you of telling the listener who is doing what and what is being done unto, they can actually reverse the order. Instead of Columbus atrado America, which would be Columbus discovered America, you could switch the order if America was the more interesting information. America atrado Columbus, because of this S ending, the speaker knows that even though this is in that second noun position, Columbus is actually the one who's meant to be doing something in the sentence. And because this is long and not short, the listener knows, okay, America is meant to be being done to. Somebody or something is doing something to America in the sentence. Whereas if it's a short they would know, okay, America is the one doing something to somebody else. So the word order is free because of these morpheme endings. And these endings are what we would call case endings. And because English doesn't have case endings on our nouns, we can't freely switch this. In English, Columbus discovered America and America discovered Columbus would have totally different meanings, but in Lithuanian, Columbus atrado America and America atrado Columbus would have the exact same meaning. So some of the cases that are often talked about is the fancy word is nominative case. We often talk about this as a subject case in many of the Western European languages, and especially when it comes to English, Korean, Japanese, we talk about a subject case. Nominative is the technical term from the Latin word meaning name. This would be the case of the noun who's doing the action, who's kind of voluntarily doing the action usually. Accusative, what we also call direct object, is the noun being immediately acted upon. In this case, America is the object, the direct object. Columbus discovered America. It's the thing being directly acted upon by Columbus. Or in this one, America honors Columbus. Columbus would be the direct object, the thing that America, the subject, is actively acting upon. Dative case is used for indirect objects. When a noun is receiving or benefiting from an action. This would be like the him in I gave him a book. A book would be the direct object, the thing being acted upon directly, but the him, I gave him a book, would be the indirect object. It's the party who's receiving or benefiting from an action. In dative, this comes from the Latin word to give, date, and so you actually see this in Russian too, datlny padej. So this would be the dative case. There's genitive cases. This is used to indicate a possessor, some noun which is possessing or modifying something else. Turkish languages actually will often use a genitive case to not mark the possessor, but the possessed, so that you know who is being owned by something. So this would be, we don't have an example in English, but it would be something like of my friend. If you've ever seen Dutch last names that would have like van, or German last names that have van, like of the field or of the city, that would be sort of a way of indicating genitiveness, being possessed. Instrumental case is used for a noun that I'm using something to act. In English, this would be like with the door, or with my knife, or by means of something. But in languages that have an instrumental case, you can actually indicate that you're using this noun to do something else by just putting an ending on it of some kind. And then there's vocative cases, which would be forms of address. Like I might have a different form for your name if I'm saying that you did something versus if I'm calling you out directly. There's actually many different cases. There's locative cases, and allative cases, and ablative cases, and illative cases. And languages that tend to stack up their cases rely a lot less on prepositions. Prepositions do a lot of the same work as a case. If we think of the dative one, I gave him a book, I could also say I gave a book to him. And that to preposition would be doing the same as dative. So languages tend to either rely a lot on prepositions or a lot on cases. Another very common inflectional category that's not used in every language, but is used in many languages, is gender or class. And this could happen on nouns, verbs, or adjectives. So we think of genders. Spanish is a language that would have two genders. We say like a feminine gender and a masculine gender. German or Russian have three, like a masculine, a feminine, and then some sort of neutral gender. A language like Swahili would have 8, a language like Chichewa would have 14. So you can see that when we start to get beyond 2 or 3, it stops really making sense to talk about these things as being gender. And this is why linguists actually prefer to use the word noun class rather than gender. It may so happen that feminine beings are in one noun class, whereas masculine beings tend to be in another noun class, but that's not always predictable or always true or always obvious. For example, in most of the Bantu languages, like Swahili or Zulu, all humans are in one gender. They all would be a single gender regardless of whether they're biologically female or biologically male. A good example of sort of the weirdness of using the word gender is that German has 3 different words for a human being. Das Geschöpf, it would be neutral. There's no gender at all. Der Mensch, with this der article, we call this the masculine gender, and die Person with this D article, we say that this is the feminine gender, and the fact that Geschöpf belongs to the group of das nouns, Mensch belongs to the group of der nouns, and Person belongs to the group of die nouns. This has a lot of other consequences if I want to use adjectives or determiners to talk about these things. There would be different changes that would have to be made if they were in different cases. So it's important, and there's a long tradition of calling these things neutral masculine and feminine, because in general, usually male beings end up in this der class and female beings end up in this D class, but that's not always true. Das Mädchen is the word for girl, and that's in the neutral class. So gender is kind of a shorthand, which is inaccurate, actually, when we talk about feminine and masculine nouns. So we usually would say maybe class 1 and class 2, or das class, der class, D class nouns. An example, like I said, from Swahili, the wa gender is for people. So if in a singular form would have a prefix ma, and a plural form would have a prefix wa. So mtu would be watu as the plural. And this pattern of a ma singular and a wa plural indicates that it's in the wa gender, so it's in the people gender. And lots of different things would fall into this. Faransa would be Frenchmen, wa Faransa would be the French men. There's another gender, which is the mi gender. This is a gender for all trees and all things in nature. So mti would be tree, miti is trees, msimba would be lion, and misimba would be lions. Now, if I were to say wa simba instead, it would make it funny. I would think that these lions are actually people. I think of them as lion people. Maybe it's something like the Lion King, I guess, where you can see where the word Simba comes from, the name for the main character in the Lion King. So tense would be where something occurs along a timeline. So if you think of time as being like a river which flows from the distant past through the present and onward toward the future, tense would be where along this river, where along this timeline does this thing occur. And languages could carve this up in very different ways. So the Arabic language just has two tenses. They have a past tense, and then they have a future or a non-past tense, which doesn't include the present, but clearly marks the future. English also has two tenses. We have a past tense, and then we have a non-past tense. The non-past would include the present events and future events. So I could say, I go to France today, or I go to France tomorrow, which would be future events. You could say, I go to the gym every day. This would be an ongoing present action into the future, but I went to the gym would be clearly past. You may have been told that English has a future tense. It doesn't actually have a future tense. We have a whole set of auxiliaries which could be used to mark different aspects of the future, like will or gonna, but they're not a true morphological tense. Lithuanian has a couple different tenses. They have a past tense and a present tense, which is clearly separated out from the future tense. Cree would have a remote past, so they have a totally different tense for something which is too long ago for you to remember it personally, a different tense for a past which you can remember, a different tense for a present, and then a different tense for the future. And Chinese actually has no tense in the language. There's no morphological tense. You can do some of this work of time through adverbials or aspect markers, but there's no true tense. And when we say that there's an infinitive form, what I mean is that I'm lifting something up above this timeline. I'm saying that thing could be landing anywhere or everywhere or nowhere. I'm just talking about this action in a very abstract way. So something like to go to school, to go to school. So this would be an infinitive phrase. To go, it's not a past event of going, it's not a present event of going, it's not a future event of going. It could be even a completely unreal event of going. Like, to go to school is what I've always wanted to do but never had the chance. Right? So this is an event that actually has never and probably will never occur on any real timeline. It's just floating there, and that's what I mark this infinitive. So infinitive is actually a kind of tense. You can think of it as a zero tense marker. You mark infinitives when there's no indication of the actual tense, and past, remote past, present, future would be other kinds of tense. If tense is where something occurred on the timeline, then aspect would be what kind of event it is on that timeline. So we can see that there's different sort of shapes of events. Some of them have no clear beginning point or no clear end point. Some, there's no beginning mark, but there's a definite end point. Some are like little instances, repeated instances of a momentary event. I could have a singular event that happened, blap, or an event that existed for a while. It doesn't really matter where on this timeline they fall. It's the shape of the event, if I were to try to map it out, that is the aspect. Habitual aspect would be something that happened regularly for a period. It happened once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times, and then stopped. This is indicated in English by something like used to. I used to go to Florida with my family, or also would. We would buy hot dogs every day before school in elementary school. So it's like this is in the past, it's kind of ended, and then there was more than one instance of that happening. Progressive would be an ongoing action, whether this would be in the past, present, or future. So I could say, we were walking outside when the lightning struck. We could say, I am walking outside right now. I can't call you. Or it could say in the future, by the time you get home, we will be going for a walk, or we will be walking already. So I'm talking about an ongoing action that's happening in the past, present, or future. Perfective aspect would be for something that has a clear completion point, and that becomes important. So something like, by the time I started school, I had already learned to read, would be the past perfect. That learning to read finished before I went to school. Or I could do a present perfect. I have seen Star Wars before, so my act of seeing Star Wars kind of went up to the present tense. Or I will have finished my homework by then. So working on the homework, and that will come to a completion point. Imperfective is a little bit like progressive. A language probably won't use both. Progressive emphasizes the ongoingness of an action, like in English, I am walking right now, or I am studying at Miss. Where imperfective would be just an action existed, and the presence of the action is more important to me than its ongoingness or than its completion. So something like, Я читал книгу, I read a book in Russian. That is an imperfect form of read. It just sort of means, okay, some reading of a book happened. Reading of a book existed. Whereas я прочитал книгу, so which would be a perfective form, shows that there was reading of a book, and then boom, it came to a stop. You could have simulfactive, which would be just a singular instances. Languages can have all different kinds of aspects, all different kinds of mapping, but usually verbs would have to inflect for or get some sort of ending or change in order to show what aspect is involved. Another interesting inflectional category is degree. So degree would talk about the intensity of something, how great or how small it is. And in English, adjectives actually will inflect for degree. Something can be small, it could be smaller, which would be even more small, we call comparative degree, or smallest, which is there is nothing smaller than it. This would be the superlative degree. So how intense is the smallness? Is it kind of intense? Is it more intense than another thing, or is it the very most intense? Normal, comparative, and superlative degree. We have good, better, best. This is an example of this that has suppletion with the root as part of what's going on, but when we add this and this est ending. Slavic languages play a lot more with degree than English does. So let's say I have this frog, but if there's another frog which is bigger, I would need a way to differentiate between these frogs. English would just say smaller. This frog is smaller. And this frog is larger than that one. This is the smallest frog, maybe the smaller frog, a small frog. In Slavic languages, zhab is the root for frog. Each would mean tiny. A would be a feminine ending, or a feminine class, noun class ending. Zhab means frog, but k would mean small. And then with the absence of it would be just a regular size. So this would be zhaba, this the normal frog. This would be zhabka to show that it's a little smaller. And then zhabichka would be a tiny little frog. And there's actually a greater degree. I could say zhabisha, which would be a giant frog. this like a monster. It's usually not only size, but something about its terribleness or its monstrosity to put this isha ending. So this would be a superlative degree. We're used to this kind of ending in Italian with issimo, which means greatly something. And then we can think of in Spanish something like the ita or ito ending would be for a small version of something. Señor, señorita, abuela, abuelita. That ita would be a degree marker. The honorific system is important in many languages to indicate formality, respect, and politeness. In European languages, this is usually done at least in second-person plural pronouns. There's an informal you and a formal version of you. So it would be tu, usted in Spanish, tu, vous in French, du, sie in German, tu, vous in Russian. It's in Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, ni is you, and nin would be the more formal version of you. Some languages actually really exploit this system. So in Korean, if I'm saying the word give to a smaller girl, I would say cho. If I was going to say you to this small girl, I would say no. This is the pronoun that I would use for this. So these would be the things for low honor. I don't have to really honor small children in this culture. If it was like a coworker, someone who was about my age and we were in a formal work setting, I may say 주세요 for to give. It's the say would be a mid honor, and then yo is adding some politeness. If I was going to address this woman with a pronoun, I might say 누나, she. So 누나 could be a woman who's slightly older than me, kind of a sister role, and she would be showing a mid-level of honor. So these would be forms I would use to talk to her. Then if I was going to be talking to an elderly person, I would have to use something completely different. I would say duri, I would use a different suppletive root for give for a respected person. Shipshi would be a high honor marker, and then yo would indicate politeness. Duri shipshio would be, could you give that to me, to this woman, it would be just jo for the younger one. And then imo and nim, so imo might be aunt, nim would be a much higher honor form, so that might be the form of address that I would have to use in this situation. All of these are various endings, various inflections for the degree of formality or respect or politeness that get called honorifics. There's many other things that speakers might want to pay attention to, that they find important enough about the world that they've chosen to inflect their nouns or verbs or adjectives about it and to weave it into their morphological system. A lot of languages will distinguish between animate and inanimate objects. So like in Ojibwa, mtig is tree, mtigwag is trees. This is the ending for animate plurals, plurals of living things. Asin is stone and asinan is stones. This is the plural for non-living things. You can think this in Spanish. I can say yo veo la catedral, I see the cathedral, but I'd have to say yo veo a mi abuelo, I see my grandfather. I need the a in front of it to show that it's a living thing that I'm seeing. Definiteness would be, is the one that I'm thinking of the same one that you're thinking of? So we could do this with the article the in English, student versus the student, a bus versus the bus. But in some languages, this is actually an inflection. Like in Romanian, student would be a student, studentul would be the student. This is like Swedish, bus would be, a bus would be bus, busen would be the bus. In Welsh, di would be house, udi, where I put this prefix and I soften the sound, I sort of make it voiced. That would indicate that I'm talking about the house. Voice is something that languages inflect for. We have active voice, the fast-running cows, where the cows are doing the running. Middle voice would be, it looks like the cows would be doing this thing, but in fact someone else is doing it to them. The fast-selling cows, the cows are being sold by someone else, but it has some aspects of an active as well as a passive. And then the sold cows, or the ran cows, would be someone ran those cows or someone sold those cows. So this would be a passive participle. So this is an active participle, a middle participle, and a passive participle. Some languages actually inflect for evidentiality, which would be really nice. You can tell by the verb ending whether you know this from hearsay, whether you observed it directly, whether you observed it from afar. There are buffalo eating. Eating would have a different form based on whether I just heard this from someone else, whether I observed it from far away, or whether I observed it firsthand nearby. And mood. Mood, we think of subjunctive moods, like in an imaginary world, this would be true. Were I rich, I would buy something. Imperative mood is like a command, go. Interrogative mood would be a question, go. And then declarative mood would be just a period, like I am going. I'm just making sort of a statement about the real world. So all of these, the imperative, interrogative, and declarative, that would be also called indicative together, about the real world, and then subjunctive is about an imaginary or a dreamed of world. So this set of data is one that we'll look at in class, and you can look and deceive with this data, can you figure out which morphological category is being inflected for in this data set? This is the same data set that we saw for the morphological processes, so see if you can see what it would be for categories.